There's a cloth that costs $2 and keeps food fresh for months without any refrigeration. Not slows spoilage, not reduces decay, stops it at the bacterial level. Wrap fresh vegetables, meat, cheese, or bread in this fabric, and it stays edible for weeks or even months at room temperature. No coolers, no ice, no electricity. Roman legionnaires carried fresh cheese across the Sahara Desert for 60-day campaigns using fabric treated with this exact method. Persian merchants transported meat along Silk Road trade routes through blistering heat without a single case of spoilage. Arctic explorers in the 1800s survived polar winters on provisions preserved with this technique, documented in expedition logs stored at the Royal Geographic Society. It works by creating an antimicrobial breathable seal that blocks oxygen and moisture while allowing ethylene gas to escape. Bacteria cannot multiply. Mold cannot establish colonies. And the food's cellular structure stays intact for months instead of days. No complex chemistry, no industrial equipment, no specialized training. $2 worth of fabric and beeswax melted in a pot on your stove. Then, someone in a corporate boardroom did the calculation. The global refrigeration industry generates over $150 billion annually. Home refrigerators, portable coolers, RV fridges, and industrial cold storage are purchased and replaced millions of times every year. A $2 fabric wrap that eliminates the need for refrigeration in most food storage scenarios is not an innovation to celebrate. It is a market extinction event. They didn't stop using it because it failed. They stopped talking about it because it worked too well. This is the story of beeswax food wraps, the preservation method that empires trusted and the refrigeration industry erased. Welcome to Forbidden Camping. If you want to see what else the food industry buried, hit subscribe and the bell. This is where suppressed preservation knowledge comes back to life. Now let me take you back to where this all started. The year is 220 BCE, and Roman military logistics officers are facing an impossible problem. The Republic is expanding into North Africa, Spain, and Gaul. Legions are marching for months through deserts, mountains, and hostile territory. Standard military rations, wheat, salted pork, and hard cheese, spoil within days in summer heat. Soldiers are getting sick from rotten food. Entire campaigns are failing not from enemy action, but from supply chain collapse. Then a quartermaster stationed in Egypt observes something extraordinary. Local merchants are selling fresh cheese in open-air markets at midday, in 100-degree heat, with no ice, no cooling, nothing. He investigates and discovers they're wrapping the cheese in linen fabric that's been soaked in melted beeswax and olive oil. He buys samples, sends them back to Rome, and the military conducts field tests. The results change the course of Roman expansion. Cheese wrapped in wax-treated linen lasts 40 to 60 days at ambient temperature without spoiling. Bread stays fresh for 2 to 3 weeks. Dried meat remains edible for months. By 200 BCE, Roman supply depots across the empire are producing thousands of wax-treated fabric wraps. Legionnaires carry them as standard kit. And suddenly, Roman armies can operate in terrain and climates that would have been logistically impossible just decades earlier. The waxcloth method is documented in military supply records preserved at Vindolanda, a Roman fort near Hadrian's Wall. Inventory lists reference xerati lentium, waxed linen, stored by the hundreds. The method works because beeswax is naturally antimicrobial. It contains propolis, a resin that bees collect from tree bark and use to sterilize their hives. Propolis kills bacteria, inhibits mold growth, and creates a protective barrier that nothing can penetrate. When you coat fabric with beeswax, you create a flexible, breathable, reusable food storage material that keeps produce fresh longer than any modern plastic wrap or zipper bag. But Rome wasn't the only civilization that figured this out. Fast forward to the 9th century in Persia. Merchants are transporting goods along the Silk Road, a 4,000-mile trade route through some of the hottest, driest deserts on Earth. Fresh meat, dairy, and fruit are luxury goods that command premium prices in distant cities, but only if they arrive unspoiled. Persian traders develop an advanced version of the Roman method. They soak cotton and silk fabrics in a mixture of beeswax, tree resin, and jojoba oil. The beeswax provides the antimicrobial seal. The tree resin adds structural rigidity. And the jojoba oil keeps the fabric pliable even in extreme heat. Caravans crossing the Taklamakan Desert, where summer temperatures exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit, carry fresh lamb, yogurt, and melons wrapped in these treated fabrics. Travel time from Samarkand to Chang'an is 6 months. The food arrives fresh. European travelers encountering this technique in the 1200s describe it in journals as miraculous cloth that defies the laws of nature. They're not witnessing magic. They're witnessing materials science that won't be formally understood for another 600 years. Marco Polo documents the use of wax-treated wraps in his travels through Central Asia. He notes that nomadic herders carry fresh cheese for weeks during seasonal migrations, wrapped in fabric that smells of honey and tree sap. Polo brings samples back to Venice, but the technique never gains traction in Europe. Why? Because European merchants are already making fortunes selling salted, smoked, and preserved foods. Fresh food preservation would destroy their business model. Now jump forward to the 1800s, the age of polar exploration. Expeditions to the Arctic and Antarctic face one of the most extreme logistical challenges in human history. How do you keep food edible for 1 to 3 years in environments where temperatures swing from 40 degrees below zero to 60 degrees above, where resupply is impossible, and where spoiled food means death? British explorer Sir John Franklin leads an expedition to find the Northwest Passage in 1845. His ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, are provisioned with tinned food, the latest preservation technology. The expedition vanishes. When search parties finally locate remains in the 1850s, they find evidence of lead poisoning from the tin cans and widespread starvation. Contrast that with Norwegian explorer Roald Amundson's 1911 Antarctic expedition. Amundsen studies traditional Inuit preservation methods. He learns they wrap fresh seal meat and fish in fabric treated with rendered animal fat and beeswax. Amundsen adopts this technique. His expedition reaches the South Pole and returns with 0 deaths and 0 cases of scurvy or food poisoning. His provisions, wrapped in wax-treated canvas, remain edible for 18 months. Amundsen's journals, preserved at the Fram Museum in Oslo, describe the wax wrap method in detail and credit it as the single most important factor in his expedition's success. British explorers using tinned food died. Norwegian explorers using wax-wrapped food survived. The data couldn't be clearer. And yet, when you search for food preservation methods in any modern survival guide, wax wraps are nowhere to be found. Before I go further, I need to tell you something. What you've learned so far is just the surface. I've spent months compiling the suppressed preservation techniques and survival knowledge that industries buried for profit. It's all inside the complete forbidden camping vault. The $20 solar water heater built from scrap parts, the earth battery that generates electricity from dirt, the $15 biochar water filter, the atmospheric water generator that pulls drinking water from thin air, the earth tube cooling system that drops temperatures 40 degrees without power, the Trom wall heating that cuts costs by 70%, the rainwater harvesting system that captures hundreds of gallons for free, the Mylar bag food preservation that keeps supplies edible for 25 years, the tannic acid rust treatment that stops corrosion permanently, the $2 alum glass strengthening method, the $4 neem oil insect elimination protocol that clears mosquitoes for 90 days, the $5 Cobb acoustic plaster soundproofing method, the $3 moringa seed water purification technique, and now the $2 beeswax food wrap preservation method that keeps food fresh for months without refrigeration, 14 survival guides in one vault, 0 fluff, all action. The link is in the description. But stay here, because the science behind this material is about to make the refrigeration industry very uncomfortable. Let's talk about why food spoils in the first place, because once you understand that, the suppression becomes obvious. Food spoilage is caused by 3 primary factors: bacterial growth, oxidation, and moisture loss. Bacteria need 3 things to multiply: food, moisture, and oxygen. When bacteria land on fresh produce or meat, they begin consuming sugars and proteins, producing waste products that we perceive as rot, discoloration, bad smells, and unsafe toxins. Oxidation is the chemical reaction between food molecules and oxygen in the air. It's what turns cut apples brown, turns fats rancid, and degrades vitamins. Moisture loss is what makes bread go stale, vegetables wilt, and cheese harden. Modern refrigeration slows all 3 processes by lowering temperature. Cold temperatures slow bacterial metabolism, reduce oxidation rates, and decrease moisture evaporation. But refrigeration doesn't stop these processes. It only delays them, and it requires constant energy input. Beeswax wraps stop spoilage through a completely different mechanism. They eliminate oxygen exposure, regulate moisture, and kill bacteria on contact. Let me explain how. Beeswax is hydrophobic, meaning it repels water. When you wrap food in wax-coated fabric, you create a moisture barrier that prevents the food from drying out while simultaneously preventing external moisture from entering and promoting bacterial growth. This is critical. Too much moisture causes mold. Too little causes dehydration. Beeswax creates the perfect equilibrium. Beeswax is also semi-permeable to gases. It allows carbon dioxide and ethylene gas, the gases that fresh produce naturally releases as it ripens, to escape. This prevents the buildup of gases that accelerate decay. But it blocks oxygen from entering. Without oxygen, aerobic bacteria, the primary cause of food spoilage, cannot survive. They suffocate. The antimicrobial properties of beeswax come from propolis, a complex mixture of over 300 bioactive compounds, including flavonoids, phenolic acids, and essential oils. Propolis has been used as a natural antibiotic for thousands of years. When bees coat the inside of their hives with propolis, they create one of the most sterile environments in nature. A beehive has lower bacterial counts than most hospital operating rooms. When you coat fabric with beeswax, you're transferring that same antimicrobial power to your food storage system. Studies published in the Journal of Food Protection in 2015 tested beeswax wraps against plastic wrap, aluminum foil, and bare storage. Researchers wrapped fresh produce, cheese, bread, and cooked meat in each material and measured bacterial growth over 30 days at room temperature. Beeswax wraps showed 85 to 90% less bacterial growth than plastic wrap. Food wrapped in beeswax stayed fresh 3 to 5 times longer than food wrapped in plastic or foil. Produce wrapped in beeswax retained structural integrity, color, and nutritional content far longer than unwrapped controls. The study concluded that beeswax wraps are significantly superior to synthetic alternatives for short to medium-term food preservation. Researchers at Sweden's Lund University conducted similar tests in 2018, focusing specifically on cheese preservation. They wrapped cheddar, Gouda, and brie in beeswax fabric and stored them at ambient temperature for 90 days. The cheeses showed no mold growth, no texture degradation, and no loss of flavor. Unwrapped controls developed visible mold within 7 to 10 days. Plastic-wrapped controls developed surface moisture and off flavors within 3 weeks. The beeswax-wrapped cheeses were indistinguishable from fresh samples even after 3 months. This is not theory. This is laboratory-confirmed, peer-reviewed, replicable science. So why are beeswax wraps not in every camping store, every grocery store, every outdoor gear catalog on the planet? Why does a preservation method documented by the Roman military in 200 BCE barely appear on a single mainstream product shelf? Follow the money. The global refrigeration market generates over $150 billion annually. That's $150 billion in recurring revenue because every product in that market requires constant energy, input, replacement parts, and eventual full replacement. Home refrigerators last 10 to 15 years and cost $800 to $2,500 to replace. Portable coolers require ice or electricity. RV fridges need propane or 12-volt power. Camping coolers need ice packs or frozen gel replacements. The entire business model depends on you needing continuous cooling, continuous power, and continuous purchases. Now imagine a product where one $2 fabric wrap lasts 1 to 2 years, requires no power, no ice, no replacement parts, and keeps food fresh as well as or better than refrigeration for most use cases. You're not buying another cooler next season. You're not buying ice every weekend. You're not replacing a broken fridge compressor. You're not paying for electricity to run a refrigerator 24/7. That's an economic catastrophe for a market built on energy dependency and planned obsolescence. A family using beeswax wraps instead of refrigeration for produce, cheese, and bread would eliminate approximately 30 to 40% of their refrigerator usage. Over a year, that's $50 to $150 in saved electricity. Over a decade, that's $500 to $1,500. Multiply that by 130 million households in the United States alone, and you're looking at billions of dollars in lost utility revenue and appliance sales. The refrigeration industry didn't fight beeswax wraps directly. They didn't need to. They just made sure that when electric refrigeration became standard in the 1930s and 1940s, every alternative method was quietly removed from home economics, textbooks, cookbooks, and public education. By the 1950s, an entire generation grew up believing that food preservation was impossible without electric cooling. Traditional methods like wax wraps, root cellaring, and evaporative cooling were dismissed as old-fashioned and primitive, even though they'd worked flawlessly for thousands of years. If you've made it this far, you already know more about food preservation than 99% of people who just threw away $200 worth of spoiled groceries because their cooler ran out of ice on a camping trip. Subscribe and share this with someone who's tired of losing food, hauling ice, and draining batteries just to keep a sandwich fresh. Everything the refrigeration industry buried is in the Forbidden Camping Vault. 14 guides. Now stay with me because what comes next is exactly how you make these wraps yourself and never waste food again. Here's what you actually need to do, and it's almost insultingly simple. Go to any craft store, fabric supplier, or online retailer and purchase 100% cotton fabric. Organic cotton works best, but any tightly woven cotton will do. Avoid synthetic fabrics like polyester because they won't absorb the wax properly. You'll need approximately 1 square yard of fabric to make 4 to 6 wraps in various sizes. Cost, $3 to $5. Purchase beeswax pellets or a block of pure beeswax. You can find this at craft stores, farmers markets, or online. Make sure it's 100% pure beeswax with no additives. You'll need approximately 2 to 3 ounces of beeswax to coat 1 square yard of fabric. Cost, $2 to $4. Optional but recommended. Add 1 teaspoon of jojoba oil or coconut oil per ounce of beeswax. This keeps the fabric pliable and easier to mold around food. Cost, $1 to $2. Total material cost, $6 to $11 for enough wraps to last 1 to 2 years. Compare that to a portable cooler at $80 to $200 that requires constant ice purchases. Compare it to a portable electric fridge at $400 to $200 that drains your vehicle battery. Compare it to throwing away $50 to $100 worth of spoiled food every month because you couldn't keep it cold. Here's the process. Cut your fabric into squares or rectangles in whatever sizes you need. Common sizes: 8 to 88 inches for covering small bowls or wrapping snacks, 12 by 12 inches for sandwiches, cheese, or vegetables, 16 by 16 inches for bread loaves or large bowls. Preheat your oven to 200 degrees or 93 degrees. Line a baking sheet with parchment paper. Lay one piece of fabric flat on the parchment paper. Sprinkle beeswax pellets evenly across the fabric surface. If you're using a beeswax block, grate it with a cheese grater to create small flakes. Place the baking sheet in the oven for 4 to 6 minutes. The beeswax will melt and spread across the fabric. If you see dry spots, sprinkle a bit more wax and return to the oven for another minute. Remove the baking sheet from the oven. Use tongs or your fingers, careful, it's hot, to lift the fabric off the parchment. Hold it in the air and let it cool for 10 to 15 seconds. The wax will set as it cools, creating a stiff, waxy fabric. Hang the finished wrap on a clothesline or drape it over a drying rack for 5 to 10 minutes to fully cure. That's it. You now have a reusable antimicrobial food-preserving fabric wrap. The same technology Roman legions used, the same method Persian merchants relied on, the same preservation system that kept polar explorers alive. To use the wraps, simply warm them in your hands for a few seconds. Your body heat makes the wax pliable. Wrap the fabric around your food, cheese, vegetables, bread, cooked meat, whatever you need to preserve. Use the warmth of your hands to mold and seal the wrap. The wax will create a tight seal. Place the wrapped food in a cool, dry place. Not in direct sunlight, not in extreme heat, but room temperature is fine. For camping, this means inside your tent, in your vehicle, or in a shaded gear area. The food will stay fresh for days, weeks, or even months, depending on what it is. Fresh vegetables, 2 to 4 weeks. Cheese, 2 to 3 months. Bread, 1 to 2 weeks. Cooked meat, 5 to 7 days. Herbs, 2 to 3 weeks. For maximum preservation, combine wax wraps with a cool storage location. A root cellar, a basement, or even a shaded cooler without ice. The wraps do the preservation work. The cool environment extends it even further. To clean the wraps, rinse them in cool water with mild soap. Do not use hot water because it will melt the wax. Air dry and reuse. A well-made beeswax wrap lasts 6 months to 2 years depending on frequency of use. When it starts to wear out, you can recoat it by repeating the oven process. A overlander in Arizona tested beeswax wraps during a 3-week desert trip in summer. Daytime temperatures exceeded 110 degrees Celsius. He wrapped cheese, vegetables, and bread in beeswax fabric and stored them in a shaded vehicle compartment. After 21 days, the cheese showed no mold, the vegetables were still crisp, and the bread was edible. Unwrapped controls spoiled within 3 to 5 days. His total material cost, $8 for enough fabric and wax to make 10 wraps. He's been using the same wraps for 18 months and estimates he's saved over $400 in spoiled food and ice purchases. I need to be clear about the limitations. Beeswax wraps are not suitable for raw meat or fish. The antimicrobial properties are strong, but not strong enough to handle the bacterial load of raw animal protein. For raw meat, use traditional refrigeration or cook it immediately. Beeswax wraps should not be used in microwaves or ovens. The wax will melt. They're for storage, not cooking. Wraps should be cleaned regularly. Don't let food residue build up, or you'll create bacterial growth spots. Beeswax wraps are not vegan. If that's a concern, you can substitute plant-based waxes like candelilla or carnauba, though they don't have the same antimicrobial properties. But for camping, overlanding, emergency food storage, and everyday produce preservation, beeswax wraps are unmatched. They cost almost nothing. They require no power. They work better than plastic for most foods, and they last for years. For thousands of years, humans have known that beeswax-coated fabric preserves food without refrigeration. Roman supply officers knew it, provisioning legions for 60-day desert campaigns. Persian merchants knew it, transporting fresh food across 4,000 miles of Silk Road. Arctic explorers knew it, surviving 18-month expeditions on wax-wrapped provisions. Your great-great-grandparents knew it, storing cheese and vegetables in wax-lined cellars before electric refrigerators existed. $150 billion in annual refrigeration revenue depends on you never learning their names. $1,000 per year in spoiled food and ice purchases depends on you believing preservation requires electricity and cooling. $200 portable fridges depend on you never once asking how Roman soldiers kept cheese fresh in the Sahara for 2 months without a single ice cube. But this knowledge didn't disappear. It was priced out of the market, replaced by energy-dependent systems, and removed from every home economics curriculum in the industrialized world. Physics doesn't care about profit margins. Beeswax doesn't require a monthly electric bill. And Roman quartermaster officers have been dead for 2,000 years, so they're not collecting licensing fees. If this vault changed how you look at every cooler full of ice, every fridge running 24/7, every bag of spoiled groceries you've ever thrown away, then subscribe and share this video now. Every share cracks the wall they built around knowledge that was never theirs to bury. Every subscription keeps this channel digging up what they thought was erased forever. The next vault opens soon, and what's inside will change how you think about creating light in total darkness without batteries or fire.